on digital radio, on the app, on your smart speaker, on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch.tv, and Facebook.
The Sportscast. Expect the unexpected.
The update presented by the Sportscast.
The Sportscast, April 22nd, 2024. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, YouTube, Twitch, X, and Apple Podcasts. You can also listen to us on your smart speaker. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and a review. It will help us out tremendously. We're also on online radio. Visit our website, thesportscast.net, also on X and IG at the Sportscast1, and check out our app, the Sportscast for iOS. The 2024 NBA playoffs began this past weekend. A lot of blowouts, a lot of question marks, and a lot of clarity, a little bit of clarity. We'll see how the game twos goes. And, of course, we got some FA Cup action. And joining us from up north, Hal Phillips. Welcome back to the Sportscast.
Thanks for having me, Santi. Always a pleasure.
Hal, we got an action-packed weekend. I'm glad you know both NBA and the FA Cup.
I actually went to a bar Saturday night. My wife's away, and I went out to a steakhouse and sat at the bar and watched the Bruins open the playoffs as well. It's a Bruins type bar next to the steakhouse. So yeah, but I got the best game of the weekend. I thought Philly and New York on one TV, Bruins on the other TV. Drinks, food, camaraderie. It's great to be alive, Santi.
It's great to be live. Action-packed weekend. We'll start first with Miami versus Boston. It was one of a heck. Well, no, it wasn't not a heck of a game. It was a blowout. Jason Tatum was a catalyst in more ways than one. Boston 114 to 94 against Miami. Tatum had 23 points, 10 boards, and 10 assists. This looked like a game series that's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be close, but what's your thoughts, Hal?
Well, I had checked something right before we went on because I couldn't remember whether or not these opening series are 7 games or 5 games. They are 7. They've been all sorts of different combos through the years, but I don't see Miami hanging with the Celtics here. They have a hoodoo over us in the past, but not without Jimmy Butler. And there were even some times during this game when the Celtics just went dead cold from 3, and they still managed to hold double-digit leads throughout and sort of make this look like a fait accompli. You know, you never say never with the Heat. Spoelstra is an outstanding coach, but the Celtics are loaded, and the Heat are not, and they're beat up, and it's hard to imagine them how they make a series from this situation.
Yeah, quite something. Game 2 is tomorrow, so we'll see. Actually, it might be. Yeah, it is tomorrow. So that's one of the games that happened this past weekend. Let's go look at the other games yesterday. Indianapolis lose against Milwaukee with no Giannis. So this is different from the Heat, who had no Butler, but this time has no Giannis. Lillard scored all his points, 35 points in the first half, 0 in the second half, as the Bucks beat Indiana 109 to 94. I think Milwaukee is looking good with no Giannis, actually.
Yeah, this was a Sunday's game, one of Sunday's games, and I think it was on in the afternoon when the FA Cup semifinals were on. So I'm flipping around channels, and at one point I flipped over to this game. It was 20-19, and I was like, oh, good, that's going to be a close game. I flipped back in 20 minutes, and the Bucks were up 30 or something ridiculous, and it was never close. I think this is an impressive FU sort of statement from the Bucks, whose medal has been challenged all week, and so has Lillard's. 35 points in the first half says all you need to say. But it doesn't help the fact that when they run into people, they're going to have to play defense again. They're not going to be able to count on Lillard to do that. So it's a very weird team. without Giannis. If they can get through the series and not play him, I think that's the strategy at this point. They're going to do it because they're going to need him come the conference semis. I was thinking just the other day that, the first round of the NBA playoffs, there's some good matchups in the West, but it's sort of like you waiting until the quarterfinals of the Champions League. The real fun stuff happens then. Now we're just sort of separating the wheat from the chaff.
Yes, Indiana had a few highlights. Pascal Siakam, who got traded from Toronto, had 36 points and 13 rebounds. And Chris Middleton from the Bucks had 23 points and 10 rebounds. So there's some actions there from the Bucks besides Hilliard. And Bobby Portis added 15 points, 11 rebounds. So the Bucks are looking good. We'll see what happens in game 2 a little bit later this week. Let's go to the other games. I'm just hopping around here because a lot of games going on.
Yes.
OKC. A lot of question marks there, but they beat New Orleans by 2 points, 94 to 92. Shia Gilgeous-Alexander, SGA, scored 28 points, including the go-ahead basket in the final minute. New Orleans, CJ McCollum almost could have won the game if he would have made his 3-point shot. But OKC, number 1 seed, won game 1.
Well, I think this sort of bears out what we talked about last week. We just don't know about OKC. They're a bit of a mystery guest, and as a number 1 seed, a total mystery guest. We don't know how they're going to react to that. The Pelicans are battle tested. They just came from a couple of play-in games, so they're even without Zion, they are ready to play, and they gave the Thunder everything they could handle here. Just a really difficult team to play against. The Pelicans are. They play great defense. They're big, and yet they're super athletic and can cover a lot of people. They're a good matchup for OKC, and I guess the Thunder get credit for winning this game. But yeah, they could just as easily have lost it. So we'll see. And they may blow out the Pelicans in game 2. But if the next game's close, I think that we're really going to prick up our ears and look forward to what happens down in New Orleans for games 3 and 4, because the Pelicans steal one here, they could really put a hurt on the top seed in the West. I'm not that worried about them, but we just don't know what this team's going to do. They're so young. They've never been there.
Very young. This is OKC's first home playoff game win since 2019. So good job, OKC. We'll see what happens. As Hal said, if the Pelicans can pull and win for game 2, things will get complicated. It's hard to win in New Orleans, I've noticed. So we'll see what happens in game 2 of the playoffs. Let's go to the other game earlier that day. The Clippers with no Kawhi Leonard, beat the Mavericks 109-97. Harden, wow, scored 28 points in his playoff debut for the Clippers. Zubac from the Clippers also had a playoff high career for 20 points and 15 rebounds. And Luka Doncic lost against the Clippers. It was pretty much a blowout by halftime, I think.
Yeah, this was not close, and this was the series that we thought would be the closest of the 8. And the Clippers said, no. There's a lot of big names missing from these rosters. Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, Giannis. We're not sure when any of these guys are coming back, but those are 3 pretty marquee names, considering all the load management that was undertaken in this regular season. One would have hoped that these guys are ready for the playoffs, but life's not like that. Human bodies are what they are. Expect the Mavericks to do a little better. They fell way behind, and they actually never quit in this game. And they were down 30 and ended up getting it down into single digits, with a minute or 2 to go. So I guess they get credit for not throwing in the towel and playing the scrubs and just waiting for game 2. That I think augurs pretty well for the rest of the series, but you just don't know in the NBA. And 7-game series, they're long, and I hope we get some close games here. There weren't that many over the weekend.
All blowouts, all the home teams won. Back to Mavericks. Luka had 33 points. Kyrie had 31 points, but nothing from their supporting cast. So that makes a difference. You got to have those role players scoring points.
Yes, and again, everything's distorted when you're down 30. Doncic and Kyrie, I think we're just trying to make it respectable, and they did shoot them back into the game to a certain extent. But again, the Bucks, they're a fine team without Giannis. The Clippers are, I think, even better equipped to go without Kawhi for long stretches of time because they've done it so often. And the Heat, who knows how they'll be without Jimmy Buckets. They didn't play terribly against the Celtics, but they're outclassed. We'll just have to wait and see. I really hope for the NBA's sake that some of these games go 6 or 7 games and they're close. But, home game blowouts, not great viewing.
Yeah. Back to the Heat. They're really going to depend on those 2 young players, Hero and Jax. It's quite interesting because they've never been in those roles before to carry the team.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But your team looked pretty good though.
My Celtics. I don't have an ownership stake in the Celtics, just to be clear, but they are my team. I don't know. In so many ways, the Heat are a model for the NBA, how to stay competitive over the long term and not break the bank and doing it. They've been to 2 finals since 2020. They've certainly beaten the Celtics enough in the playoffs. They've done very, very well. I don't necessarily understand how they've built this team. They have the core. They had a very an extremely promising young core 4 or 5 years ago. They're not that young anymore, but they're still playing Kevin Love significant minutes.
I forgot he existed.
Well, and they've garnered all sorts of plaudits for picking guys like Gabe Vincent off the scrap heap, and Highsmith is a nice player. And Caleb Martin is a nice player, but you don't win anything with guys like that. They're 6, 7, 8 guys on your roster. Why this guy Jovic is a nice player and he's big, and he may end up being a key player for them. I always thought that they had to have someone playing next to Bam who could actually rebound the ball and protect the goal a little bit better than someone like Kevin Love or Udonis Haslem, who they had on the roster, way past his sell-by date. I don't understand necessarily how they built the roster. I think they tried, signing Terry Rozier earlier. Well, I guess he signed them in February.
I think it was pretty late.
Yeah. He's a nice player, and I think a really good fit for them. He's hurt, and so their backcourt is, a little suspect. But wow, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Mexican dude by way of UCLA, nice player. Again, I don't know where they
getting a lot of experience right now with the playoffs.
Oh my goodness, and he's playing the point for them, and he looks great, and he looks like a handful. So they've still got weapons, and if Jimmy Butler were healthy, maybe they'd be giving the Celtics more of a game. But if Jimmy Butler was healthy and ifs and buts were candy and nuts, then Christmas would come every day, Santi. But it doesn't.
Yeah, you got to deal with health. Just what House said, you got to deal with that, and just see what you have in your bench and see what happens. Saturday, the Lakers and the Denver Nuggets was kind of not a close game. It was pretty much
a good game.
It was a good game. Nikola Jokic had 32 points and 12 rebounds as the Nuggets beat the Lakers 114-103. LeBron James finished with 27 points and Anthony Davis with 32 points. But once again, the Nuggets with their rebounding game was good enough to beat the Lakers.
This was the second game on Saturday night. Because I hope we're going to talk about the Knicks and the Sixers. I thought that was the best theater all weekend, but this was a good game. And, I told you I camped out at Mac's Bar and Grill in beautiful Auburn, Maine, and had dinner there and made some friends and watched the Bruins, watched the Knicks and Sixers. And this was the game on late. And I thought it was good. And I thought that the Lakers played well. But, when you watch a network game start to finish, you get a sense for just how many commercials Nikola Jokic is doing now. He's doing like hotels.com, and he's brought in guys from his roster, scrubs, like Peyton Watson, this young guy, and someone else that I'm forgetting. They're doing spots with him. He's also pitching the new The Rise of Gru, the new Minions movie. Is he in this movie?
I
do you know?
don't know. I don't have those notes on that, but it'd be interesting if he did, because we haven't seen that in the past shortly. But yeah,
No,
interesting.
it's like a poor man's homage to, Jordan and his deal with Disney and the remake of Space Jam. But I don't know. He's the rise of Gru, the rise of Jokic now commercially is quite interesting to me. But the Lakers are better than most of the teams in the West when it comes to playing Denver. They match up pretty well with them. But you know what? They're not as good as Denver almost across the board. That matchup there we see in the graphic is what makes it fun, is that Davis is just a great defensive player. Right. And he gives Jokic a difficult time. But, how difficult? Jokic had 37, 12, and 7. So not that difficult.
How far will this series go? How do you think it might go all the way to the stretch? Or
I think the Lakers will win a game. I'm not sure they'll win two. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as Denver. I think the only team that there's two teams that I think can play with Denver, and neither of them, and Dallas is not one of them. It's Minnesota, because they're so huge and they defend so well. I think we'll give them trouble, and I think the Clippers, if they can get out of this first series and get Kawhi Leonard back, give the Nuggets a hard time. But other than that, I don't see anybody touching them. Not in the West. I think the Thunder will crumble underneath a decent scheme and Mr. Jokic pulling the strings.
How about Phoenix going up against them? You think they could slow them down? Or
this was interesting because they did reasonably well against Denver this year, and I think historically they've played Jokic pretty well. And I've heard some pundits play up the idea that, one of the things that Denver and Minnesota do to you is they just pound you, and you have to, you can't get inside. You can't run your normal sets and get anything close to the basket. Well, Phoenix doesn't care about that. They have 3 guys that are going to shoot right over you. 4 now, if you consider Grayson Allen is turned into a pretty decent player, much to the chagrin of many people in my Roto League who have an unnatural hatred for him. They call him Grayson the punk ass bitch.
No way.
I don't know why. I don't know why they hate him so much. I'm not going to argue with them. No, that's the crowd. That's the hive mind speaking. Anyway, Phoenix has played well against the better teams in the West. We talked about that last week.
Right.
But I don't think they have a chance against Minnesota, because Minnesota's got Cat back, and they just get too many easy looks at will. Poor Nurkic. He's got nobody helping him on that team. There's nobody in there except Durant, who will rebound the ball. And I think they're a little bit out of their depth. But I do think it'll be fun if they can win a couple of games. I'm just hoping for some decent series.
Exactly. Let's go to New York. House says this was the best game of the weekend. New York Knicks defeating the 76ers. Let's get my notes here. I lost it. 111 to 104.
Yeah.
Deuce McBride, Brunson's backup, led a huge effort by New York reserves in a 111-104 victory over the Sixers. Brunson and Josh Hart had each scored 22 points, but Brunson pointed the credit elsewhere when asked in his interview on the court what it took for the Knicks to pull the victory, and it was Deuce McBride.
Deuce McBride is just one of the great basketball names. I mean, that could be a guy from that semi-pro movie that Will Ferrell did. I can't recommend that movie well enough to any of the freaks, the hoop freaks out there in the audience. Check it out if you haven't seen it. If you have, watch it again, because it's playoff time. Deuce McBride is the guy that made who's the dude Quickly, Emmanuel Quickly. They traded him to Toronto in the trade for.
Please remind me.
I'm blanking. 6'5", great defender.
Porzingis?
No. Anyway, Deuce McBride made Emmanuel Quickly available to trade, and he's played very, very well. And this was a great game to watch. I watched it in the Spar without sound, and it was close throughout. They won by 7, but the real drama happened in the first half. And, I thought Embiid looked really good. He's got this big brace on his leg, on his left leg, and on his knee. And at one point in the first half, maybe early in the second quarter, he wheels into the lane and they defend pretty well. And he's too far from the basket to Euro step, to the hoop. So what does he do? He slings the ball up the back, catches himself, and dunks it all. And that's the best in-game dunk you ever see, is being guarded. And he comes down funny on that bad leg. Boom, he's down. And everyone in the building thinks that his knee has been ruined again. He gets up after a period of time, disappears. I ordered another drink. I got, lost or I'm watching the Bruins game over on this TV. All of a sudden, Embiid's back in the second half, and it was a great game all the way back and forth.
Which he fell. He fell on the court a little bit because of his right knee. I think he landed on his right knee pretty bad.
He came down funny. I watched the replay over and over. There was no buckling, but the way he reacted made it look bad. And he was taken off, and I'm like, we're not going to see him again until November. But he came back and looked fine. So I think this is going to be a great series. Another really first-class All-NBA player, Julius Randle, not going to be playing. He's out for the season. Yet another huge talent that was not load managed effectively enough. He's out with a shoulder issue. And I think Philadelphia can beat the Knicks, but they have to keep Embiid on the floor. And without him, I don't think they have a prayer. But this is the one hope, I think, for a real knockdown, drag out, almost a Subway series. The fans are really involved at both buildings. Neither of these teams, I think, has enough to win the whole thing, the whole enchilada. But it's for a first-round NBA series, it's about the best we could hope for.
Nahobe was definitely a good addition for the Knicks, so we'll see what happens next couple of games. It could be close.
It's Anunoby.
Anunoby.
He's the dude that they traded, package for with Toronto, and he's been great for the Knicks. He got hurt too, but is back now. Tom Thibodeau, he's developed the rest of that roster beautifully, and they have and now Mitchell Robinson is back in the middle, so they don't have to rely on Hartenstein as their only big guy. They're very tough to play, but I think the Sixers can beat them if Embiid plays.
All right, last game we're gonna go over because you already talked about Minnesota Phoenix. Let's go to Orlando losing against Cleveland, 97-83. Mitchell scored 30 points. Jared Allen had 18 rebounds, and the Cavs looked tougher mentally and physical. How is all Cleveland?
Yeah, they did, but Orlando's not very good, and they have no shooters. And I think they shot 33% from the floor for this whole game, and were never a threat. Jonathan Isaac is one of their centers. They play three of them. They've got Gogo Batadze, they've got Willie Carter Jr., and they've got Isaac, who's a defensive guy. Isaac played a lot in this game. I thought that was interesting. I would have thought they'd have played some of their bigger banging type centers against both Mobley and Jared Allen, but they did not. They were never looked in this game. And they never looked like they had a clue offensively. They're playing Gary Harris with Terrell Suggs in the backcourt. That duo is not going to win you playoff games. They just have no shooters. Aside from Banchero and occasionally Franz Wagner, they don't have enough offensive talent on this team. They play great defense. They rebound like a son of a gun, but that's all they do. So hats off to them. They've made the playoffs. They have a nice young core. They just need some shooters. And I would say they should call up the Hawks and make a Godfather offer for Trae Young.
All right. We'll get into game 2 predictions a little bit later. Let's go to FA Cup. Yesterday, Man United, Coventry. Hold on. Man United was up 3-0, Hal. Yes. Coventry tied it 3-3 towards, I think there was like 20 minutes left to the game or 10 minutes. And then Man United won in penalties with the penalty shot goal, winning goal by Rojland. Man United has an FA Cup chance, but now they'll face Man City.
Never before has there been a Manchester derby in an FA Cup final. So I think that's about the most interesting thing we've got to say about that final upcoming, because Man City is way better. But, any team on a day that's as talented as Man City can contest an FA Cup final, and they will get the chance to do that. It was an amazing game against Coventry. They didn't play badly, Coventry, and the City did not, but they end up falling behind 1-0. They got extended. They gave up another, and boom, it's 3-0, and it looked over. But they scored 3 goals after the 70-minute mark to tie this game, and then they went into the obligatory 30-minute overtime slog where hardly anybody threatened the goal. I think there was one chance. Interesting week for penalty kicks. There was of course, a penalty kick.
Haji Wright.
There was Haji Wright scored the penalty that tied the game, and he scored another penalty in the shootout that decided the game. But there was a shootout between Manchester City and Real Madrid midweek in the Champions League semifinal, and or was that the quarterfinal? It was the quarterfinal. It was the last quarterfinal. Now we have
pesky quarterfinals.
This is in the weeds. Okay, but when you're watching a penalty shootout, the 5 shooters from each team, twice in each of these shootouts, the goalie did not guess on one of the first 2 shots.
He's standing right in the middle.
Stood there, and you can tell it completely messed with the brain of the entire opposing shooting corps, because now, once the goalie has not moved, no one dares go down the middle. No one dares Panenka, come in there and take a big swing and then pop it right down the middle, because the goalie's diving out of the way. So anyway, this is something I've been, beating a dead horse with amongst my soccer friends for years. I'm like, because this is a really smart move, is to just once early in a shootout, don't move and just react. Maybe you'll save it. But even if you don't save it, you're showing the team that there's a possibility you are not going to move and guess. So twice it happened over the weekend, and both times that keeper ended up winning the shootout for his team. So, it's not a sure thing, but I think we may be seeing a change in the norms that govern the shootout, so that there's a little bit of very much in the weeds soccer talk for our fans out there, because that was wild. That was a wild week.
It was a wild week in sports, man. On general Champions League and now the Premier League, FA Cup.
Yes.
The day before, on Saturday, Man City got their revenge win. They didn't look too good, by the way, but they beat Chelsea 1-0. Anyone can beat Chelsea 1-0 in Wembley, but they needed that. There was not a Erling Haaland did not play due to an injury, I believe. They couldn't really reveal the details, but Man City got their win after losing against Madrid.
It was a deflected goal. It was the only goal. And I would say over the first 70 minutes, Chelsea had half a dozen really great scoring chances, should have scored, had breakaways, had, not like half chances, full on chances, and could not convert a one of them. So City was actually fortunate to get out of there with the victory, setting up that Manchester derby in the final, which I don't think is going to be played till the end of May. That's typically when it's done. And there was also a Clasico yesterday between Real and Barcelona. Real won it 3-2, and wow, Xavi just goes out in a blaze of complaints and angst.
Yeah, and the president of Barcelona was calling for a replay. I think they said they had 3 incidents that the officials didn't call for them or something, which I've never seen a replay ever. You can't do it. I mean, it is what it is.
For folks who may not know, I mean, replays were par for the course for decades and decades. That's how ties were basically adjudicated in tournaments. They didn't have shootouts until 1970, and the first shootout that was actually held at a major championship wasn't until 1976. So up until 1970, if you had a semifinal that finished, 120 minutes with no score or time to score, they just showed up the next day and played again. And you realize, what a different world that was in the 60s when, television was not guiding necessarily what happened. Broadcasters, well, they, suppose we did that today. They have a replay from Sunday's semifinal that can't be decided. Does anyone watch? I mean, do they even have all the equipment on board to broadcast that game? Do people's tickets count? I mean, they used to have rain dates on tickets. That's how they did it. They said, if this thing gets rained out or there's a force majeure, there's an earthquake, we're going to be playing this replay on the Thursday after. But it's a different world back then. But just so you know, they're complaining because they did get screwed. I did not watch this game. I only saw the highlights. Some very controversial calls, but it basically boils down to the idea that while La Liga arguably the best, soccer league in the world, has VAR. They do not have goal line technology.
Oh wow, that's a
So,
big diff.
yeah, so that those overhead shots of the goal line that basically determine instantaneously whether the ball's in or not, and then they call the referee and tell him that's a goal or that's not a goal. That does not exist in Spain. So that's one of the things that they want adjudicated, is that one of the goals that they claim should have counted did not. That would have put them up 3-2. So really terribly frustrating year for Barcelona in 2023, 24. And it's not quite over yet, although it's all over but the shouting, because they can't win La Liga. They're out of the Champions League. Xavi has already resigned.
Right.
And, what could happen next in Barcelona? Your guess is as good as mine.
Barcelona, yeah, their drama continues, or soap opera actually.
Yes.
In other U.S. men's national team news, Serginho Test got injured yesterday. I mean, this past weekend, so it might affect his Copa America parents. Your thoughts on that?
I just read about it. It would be a shame for him not to be available. He's really a big time weapon for the U.S. He's so good going forward. Luckily, the U.S. team has ridiculous depth now that they did not have for 30 years. So he'll be missed, obviously. But and I don't know that they'll ever be able to, replace his forward going talents. But they probably will replace him with an excellent option who stays at home more and plays more of a defensive, outside back position. So it might just help them. They've got such a strong midfield. But yeah, that sucks. And I was interested to see where Dest is going to end up. I mean, he's played so well for PSV, and he's looking for a better contract and a bigger league, and now he's hurt. So a lot of that goes out the window.
Yeah, and he's still on loan from Barcelona, so we'll see where he goes next. All right, predictions. How tonight? Game 2 start. Orlando at Cleveland. Who takes game 2?
Cleveland.
Cleveland sounds good to me as well. And tonight, Philadelphia at the Knicks, which you said this could tighten things up in this series, but what will happen tonight?
The Knicks played really, really well, and they got 21 points from Deuce McBride. I'm picking the Sixers. I think the Sixers are going to steal one.
Yeah, and then lastly, later on at 10:30, which probably none of us will be watching, Lakers at the Nuggets.
Yeah, I'm gonna. How can you not pick the Nuggets? I'm impressed that the Lakers have gotten better. They're 22-10 until they lost the other night, the other day to the Nuggets. So they finished the season very well, but they're still nowhere near as good as Denver.
Man, yeah, it's just that first round of the playoffs, you have to go up against the defending champions. That's just is rough. It doesn't get any easier. Anyways, there you have it. NBA playoffs throughout the week. We had the draft on Thursday, so a lot going on in sports.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the Premier League is going towards the end. Liverpool won yesterday, 3-1. We needed that win.
Who'd they play?
Fulham.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. With no Tim Ream, but
Tim Ream's been out of that starting lineup for a month and a half now. It's sort of sad. Yeah. He may be at the end of the line for Tim Ream. Who's
I think so too. Yeah, might come back to the MLS.
Great shift for the Cottagers.
Fulham. So yeah, Liverpool won. Arsenal won this past weekend, and we'll see what happens with Man City. They play Brighton this weekend, so there might be a shot that Brighton could make things interesting for everyone.
And I think that not to make it all about me, but I think Tottenham and Man City were actually scheduled to play this weekend. Obviously, Man City had a semifinal in the FA Cup take precedent, so they're going to have to fit that game in some point.
Let's go Tottenham.
Yeah, and that's going to be midweek, and Man City has got to juggle Champions League. It's going to be an interesting situation, but Tottenham is going to be the center of all this because they play Arsenal and they play Man City. And do they still have a game against Liverpool left?
I think so. I think I saw yesterday on the NBC graphic. I think I saw Tottenham Liverpool.
Yes, so it could go really badly for Tottenham.
Tottenham, right? They're playing all the three contenders. Man, well, hopefully we beat Man City at least. That's what
I hope so. I watched the Arsenal game because I think Wolves have really played well this year.
I like Wolves.
They've snuck up and beaten a lot of very good teams, but And Arsenal has just destroyed bad teams in EPL. You watch the first half of the game, they're 4-0, and you flip it off because it's just without drama. But they just barely beat Wolves yesterday. They won 1-0, and Wolves never looked like they were going to score, but geez, Arsenal didn't either. So it was a very different Arsenal team that I saw this weekend in light of their travails in Europe. And, they could be, at the end of the road mentally. That game against that, we may look back and say, geez, the high point of their season was the draw with Man City. That if they had won, we'd be talking differently. But mentally, they seem to have fallen off a cliff. And we'll see how the last month goes.
Yeah, the two clubs that are usually spoilers, what I've noticed this past 2 seasons has been Wolves and Brighton. Those two teams kind of spoil those top 5 clubs. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. Premier League's kind of tight, hopefully. Anyways, before we go, what is the best way to reach you online?
Right there at the bottom of the screen. That's my website for Generation Zero, my 2022 book, bestseller. It's also the address that I use on Instagram and Threads, where I'm enjoying Threads more and more.
Yeah, it's interesting that I found some new people on Threads that I've never knew about. So let me just hit.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to code it. There's no hashtags per se. They
it's not really official on there yet, but I think you're allowed to use it, but it's not like integrated in the algorithm, I guess.
But it's definitely more civil, and
for now,
there's less shithousery going on generally.
There you go. You can reach us at thesportscast.net, our website, or the Sportscast1 on IG and X. We'll be live tweeting throughout the week, like going on sports, and how it only gets better from here.
Is that true? Great.
I think. Anyways,
glad to hear it.
This was your update.